framework evaluators that we prepared, developed with the sponsorship of UNFPA under Asia Pacific Evaluation Association's regional evaluation strategy. And then last but definitely not the least, to understand what the learners, you and we need to do as individuals to identify competency gaps, do a kind of a fit gap analysis and bridge them, the gaps, and continuously sharpening and enhancing them with simple development plans. Next slide. So sixth webinar, the topic for today is interpersonal competence. Next slide, please. As usual, I would love to start with a pitch of a quote to refresh our thinking nozzles. And there are two quotes actually. These two quotes are from one of the management gurus and also the motivational speakers of our time, Dr. Stephen Covey. He has written a lot of books. I think most of you must have heard about the habits, the 7 habits of successful people. And in fact, he has wrote one book only on the 8th habit. And he says, when you really listen to another person from their point of view and reflect back to them, that understanding, it's like giving them emotional oxygen. So this is something that we as evaluators should value, to understand the other person's point of view, put ourselves into the shoes of the others, and we call it actually the communicate and interact with empathy. So it's like giving emotional oxygen. And also more often we will use the term synergy today. Synergy is what happens when 1 + 1 = 10. We are familiar with 1 + 1 more than 2. It can equals 10 or 100 or even 1,000. It's all about the passion, the energy, the ingenuity, the inventiveness or the cleverness, the excitement of creating a new reality that is far better than the old reality. So synergies is that, and we will in the field of development sector, we'll move and talk about synergy. So next slide. So agenda for today as usual, we'll start with the expectation of evaluation. I will just casually walk through the model that we always explain in all our webinars, and competency framework in a nutshell. Again, a snapshot of the framework, and competency domain, interpersonal competencies. Will understand what it is, and performance criteria. We all know the competencies do not go alone. So they always have to go with a performance criteria. It has to be linked, connected with the performance in the field of evaluation practice. And then work conditions and challenges, and understanding competencies with indicative behaviors. We will go to the nitty-gritties, the granular level of interpersonal skills. And competency building tips, we always talk about some tips and tricks to develop and enhance the competency. And we will also give you, as time permits, some learning reflections. We have parked 2 scenarios for you that is connected to the interpersonal competence that we have picked from the evaluation practice. And then we will continue the learning journey. Next slide. Okay, so expectation of evaluation. Sure, we would not be satisfied with the able evaluators. We want them to be capable evaluators. And not only capable evaluators, they have to be excel in their competency. They have to show their competencies as the highest level. When competent evaluators work and when they gather experience, exposure, and slowly inching up their expertise, they will be qualified evaluators. So they will always present credible, reliable, and useful evaluations. So we call them quality evaluations. So quality evaluations will be used, the stakeholders will be compelled, influenced to use those evaluations. And when the evaluations are used up to a greater extent, we will see the improved policies, organizations, and programs. And finally, we will see the impact in the quality of life of the people. So as evaluators, that is what we love to expect to see in other people, to see that impact in others. So to see that impact, and to see that impact spread in our countries and also throughout the region. And we have to work hard. So one area is to improve our professionalism, and part of it is competencies. Next slide. Okay, the competency framework in a nutshell. This is what this is a snapshot, the extract of the book, the work that we have done. And here you can see the 6 competency domains. We have professional practice, technical competence, contextual analysis, program management, which we covered during the last month. And today we discuss about interpersonal competencies and one more domain to go, personal and professional development. So if I give you the numbers, so there are 6 competency domains and 43 competencies that we have defined, prescribed under those domains. So 43 competencies are very important. And when it comes to indicative behaviors, we had the luxury of describing it in different angles, all these competencies. So you get a large number of indicative behaviors, 208 indicative behaviors. And today we talk about interpersonal competence. And under that, there are 7 competencies. And under those 7 competencies, we have 37 indicative behaviors. We will very soon discover what those indicative behaviors and also the competencies are. Next slide, please. So interpersonal competency. So what does interpersonal competency mean? Essential interpersonal competencies to demonstrate the ability to create synergies and capacities for interdependence and collaborative contribution among members of the stakeholders in the field of evaluation. So under this, you can see on your right side of the screen, the competency areas. So these are not competency statements, but competency areas. So we'll talk about communication strategy, nothing new, no rocket science. We all know these competency areas. And we'll talk about communication skills, written and also oral and oral, that is listening separately. And we will talk about some of the other skills that are really necessary for us to get on with people easily and effectively, social skills. And we'll also talk about feedback skills and achieving consensus. And we'll discuss negotiation skills and conflict management, one of the very important skills that we need to have as evaluators. And finally, collaboration and partnership synergy. Next slide. So performance criteria, so why these interpersonal competencies are required? How can we perform better in the evaluation field of evaluation with sound interpersonal communication competence, interpersonal competencies? So evaluator competencies focus on efficient and effective exchange of information. So that is what we need to perform as evaluators with all the stakeholders. And through an impactful communication strategy by using all forms of communication. So it's again according to the needs of the context and the situation, and the use of powerful negotiation skills to overcome conflicts and achieve consensus to reach collaboration and synergy in the evaluation practice. So when we perform as evaluators, that is what we need to perform better with sound interpersonal competence. Next slide. So let's look at some of the work conditions and challenges. So we know what the performance criteria, how do we have to use interpersonal competence to perform better, but it's not easy peasy. There are a lot of challenges coming, different work conditions that you need to cope up with, different situations. So let's look at some of them. This is only indicative. Okay, this is not exhaustive. You might have a lot of other inputs as well. And I would like to remind you, this is andragogy, adult learning. You carry a lot of enormous experience with you in this related to this, the application of this competency. And whenever you see that something is worthwhile to share, you can throw it, you can share it in the chat box, or you can later on, you can voice your opinion, and that will definitely enrich the learning. Okay, so the cultural differences and diversities, that is one of the challenges that we have in interpersonal competencies. A lack of active listening skills, I would say, is a lost art. We all know, we always, when we get on with people in the society, in the organizational context, in the evaluation context, different work groups, stakeholders, we see a lot of people love to talk, sharing ideas is very important. And we also have to practice listening skills. So listening skills is not just nodding your head again and again, and then looking at the other people's with the extended eyeballs. Listening skills is all about, it's being affirmative is very important. And you can also do some paraphrasing. You can ask, is it what you want to say? Is that what you had explained? Or you can paraphrase. And you can also actively, you can the leaning towards the other person, you can listen. So listening is a very important skill. So poor listening can cause issues. We sometimes see when we communicate with people, the other person sometimes doesn't allow the other person to finish the sentence, so he starts speaking. So likewise, there can be a lot of internal noises. So poor communication skills, written and oral, and inappropriate communication tools, and there can be oversharing of information. Too much information is all sometimes can be a problem, can make conflict, and too little information is also not good. And lack of trust and care. So if there is no trust, it's very difficult to get on with people and create that interdependencies and synergies. A lack of EQ competencies, the gone are the days that we worried highly about IQ skills, intelligent quotient. Now that has been replaced by emotional quotient. So it's about self-awareness, it's about self-regulation, it's about motivation, it's about empathy, it's about social skills. So lack of it may be an issue, and different viewpoints and lack of consensus always is a very common challenge. And sometimes ego, when you have strong egos, that will also prevent you in communicating effectively, and then the practicing the other skills as well. And know-it-all syndrome sometimes can be a problem. There are people that when we start discussing some topic, they know A to Z of the topic. So when we slowly reach to another topic, they will also try to show that they all know in and out of the problem. So those are very common things, common challenges. And roles and responsibility conflicts, if they are not defined properly, if RUSCI roles, the responsibility, accountability, support, consult, inform, that framework is not defined properly, can be a problem. And choosing wrong communication strategies and channels, and lack of agreement and alignment on goals and actions can be an issue, particularly when we are dealing with projects. Information filtered can be a problem, and sometimes the lack of inclusiveness and self-erected barriers, organizational silos can be a problem. So there can be different work conditions and challenges. I'm sure you might have come across very different context in your evaluation practice that has challenged you to change your interpersonal strategy, you apply your interpersonal skills. Next slide. Okay, so let's move on to the competencies, the details of competencies. So we first start with communication strategy, and then there are 3 competencies that we have defined here related to competencies. Communication. One is about the communication strategy, very important one, and written and verbal communication. So I must tell you, if you ask from me or anybody else, I think you can ask for yourself, what is the single most important competency, interpersonal competence, that you think is of prime importance for the evaluators? I would say beyond doubt, it's communication. So without sound communication skills, it's very difficult for you to put your point across to the other person and to influence, to explain, and make sure that yourself is heard by the others. So communication is centered, very important. The first one, develops and uses an impactful communication strategy relevant to the evaluation context. So under that, seeks information and advice about specific communication and language. There may be different language needs and preferences of individual, and your reviews your communication strategies to ensure that they are appropriate to these needs. And follows levels of communication hierarchy. Sometimes when you work in the context with the organization, so there are some organization policies, practices, so you need to respect to those policies and practices, and also the hierarchy of communication. So overcomes barriers to effective and respectful communication. We all know how we can make communication more effective with stakeholders, including various perspectives in the context. And when we look at the communication skills written, so chooses appropriate form and format of information required by the audience, and constructs the message logically with clarity and brevity. So it's very important you select the proper form to communicate, and you construct your message very clearly, logically, and the other person, there are a lot of clarity in it, other person can understand easily, and also it's not you're not giving a lot of information, or you're not making it complicated. It's really you are communicating with brevity. And demonstrate ability to use language effectively, uses correct diction, produces grammatically, spelling and grammatical, spelling and punctuation error-free documents. So it's not that we look at like a quality inspection, we look at all the errors, the grammatical mistakes and all that, but it's important that you brush it up and slowly, and you get to use getting the practice, the skills properly to use the written communication. Ensures that any written communication, for example, the faxes, emails, and there can be other letters that will uphold the dignity and respect of the individuals and colleagues and others whom evaluators may come into contact in their evaluation practice. So that is very important. When you communicate with people, you preserve the dignity, the respect for people is very important. And also demonstrate ability to create smart data visualization for the right purpose. I think we are really fortunate and rich with working with the millennials and the young, even centennials have come into the picture who are actually image rich and very clever in using these communication tools. So it can be objects, it can be posters, it can be graphs, charts, it can be maps, and it can be infographics, info and graphics together, or any social media. So next slide. Okay, so communication skills, oral and oral, demonstrate effective oral and oral communication skills, adapt styles to suit different people and situations, and make effective presentations. So we'll go into the indicative behaviors. Communicates information in a direct and concise manner so that the evaluator understand what the others are trying to convey, and others understand what you as an evaluator trying to convey, the message you want to convey to them, and uses appropriate questions to gain consistent and detailed information with clarity and tact. So you are very diplomatic in getting more information. So there are different types of questions you can ask. I'm sure you all must have heard about it. There can be direct questions, there can be leading questions, lead to a topic, and there can be probing questions. You want to probe more, you want to discover more, and go stratify into next, go to the stratified level of information. And so there are different questioning methods that you can use to get more information, clear information. Interprets non-verbal messages conveyed through postures, gesture, facial expressions, and tone of voice, very important. So there is a saying, it is not what you say, it is how you say. So even you are hearing even the words of the others, right? But when you look at his posture, the way he behaves in front of you, and also the gestures and facial expression, the moods and the tone of voice, so you will understand that will give a different message actually. Not what exactly the other person wants to tell, a person is telling you. So it's very important to understand these non-verbal, I would say, the expressions. Listens actively with asking question, testing of understanding, undistracted. We talk about this, and acknowledges, response, shows support, and encourage, avoiding interruption. Too many encouragement also sometimes can make it interrupted, can bother the other person. So a response to emotional reaction with respect and empathy, and makes effective presentations that are well structured and presented in a logical manner. So that is what we most of the time we have to do this. We are making lots and lots of presentations. So when you make presentation, is always very important for you to start with a logical frame of mind. See, we all know the opening and also the body and the ending, and then have a kind of a logical flow, and then arrange all the slides accordingly. And then there are certain, I'm not going into details of making a presentation, the rules, and also there are some cardinal rules that some people advocate to to follow when you prepare slides and all that. So that is important, and explains and shares jargon-free, clear, precise, and non-emotive content with a clear and audible voice. So that is about oral and oral. Next slide. Okay, social skills, those are also important in interpersonal domain. Demonstrate excellent social skills, acts comfortably with other people's emotions, and assesses accurately the collective mood of the stakeholder group. You have to read the mood of the stakeholder group sometimes. Interacts smoothly with stakeholders, and very easy to get on with you, the stakeholders, and persuades and leads the teams easily and also purposefully. It's not that you are getting carried away with what you are doing, but your focus, right? You have a purpose, and negotiates and settles disagreements and disputes with the team. You have to open if there is something that you have to the unearth and put it on the table. You need to do that. Sometimes you have to be very open and honest in your communication. There is it's very transparent and traceable, and facilitates cooperation and teamwork. So there are social skills that you need to apply. And feedback skills and achieving consensus, it's also very important. Display skills in feedback management and achieving consensus. So gives positive, negative feedback at the right time and place, focuses on the actions and behaviors. We are not focusing on the personalities and also attitudes of the people. We are not tailing behind them. We are very focused on giving feedback. And sometimes we need to give positive feedback and sometimes it's negative. You have to sometimes have to tell the bold truth, and restricts feedback to those things the evaluator knows. You cannot go on preconceived notions. Okay, this might be the reason that he's telling me a story, and so you cannot jump into conclusions. So based on, stay within your boundary, within what you know exactly, and speak up, and gives receiver the opportunity to respond, give feedback, and receives positive, negative feedback effectively, listens carefully, evaluates honestly, gets clarity, understanding, and acknowledges valid points, and clearly defines the action or decision on which stakeholders need to reach consensus, and agrees that consensus is required. So consensus is a very, very important thing. So what is consensus? When we work in a team, you respect the right I have to hold a different opinion. I may have a different opinion to the team. So I can voice that opinion, and you respect the right I have to hold that opinion. But at the end of the day, end of the discussion, I respect the team's collective decision. That is consensus. So we debate, and we can have very constructive disagreements, and in communication we say we agree to disagree, and then we discuss, and sometimes we easily subscribe the other person, the points of views. So after the discussion, I will not go outside and tell, okay, I had a very brilliant idea, I told them, but they are not ready to listen. That's not like that. So you have to build that consensus within the team, and explain the situation, and chooses one solution which seems the best fit. So there cannot be in interpersonal skills, in situation, there cannot be one solution, one fits all solution. So it's different, getting varied according to the situation. Next slide. Okay, about negotiation skills and conflict management. Demonstrates negotiation skills and manages conflicts. Applies negotiation to achieve peer and organizational buy-in to the overall evaluation strategy. That can be evaluation strategy, that can be other thing, that can be your evaluation action plan, and that can be a change management to key initiatives and outcomes. Works with the executive team to effectively negotiate the required resources for the implementation of the agreed strategy. So there are plenty of areas that where you have to use your negotiation skills and sometimes conflict management as well. Works with cross-functional teams to negotiate effective solution to difficult organization or business challenges, and recognizes conflict. When there is a conflict, you cannot run away from the conflict. You have to face the conflict and agrees, try to have kind of a code of conduct, kind of an agreement that how we are going to sort it out, and discusses and listen to the both parties and clarifies understanding. And practice positivity, impartiality, patience, active listening in managing conflicts. Next slide. Okay, so we have come to the last of the competency, interpersonal competencies, the collaboration and partnership synergy, very important. Builds collaboration and creates strong partnership synergy. So promotes shared vision, sets common and compatible goals and expectations, stretches to motivate team members, always motivate, inspire the team to go that extra mile, extra distance, go the distance, seeks partnership opportunities with mutual recognition, adaptability, flexibility, and wider network, and encourages and fosters teamwork and spurs various teams to explore and experiment at pace. So you give the freedom of exercising and coming up with different ideas within your boundaries, within the action plans, within the goals and objectives, within the strategic framework, within your tactical framework. You can do a lot to build synergies and participation, synergies and collaboration. So shares decision-making, responsibility and authority, and encourages healthy consensus and agreement, and builds an atmosphere with trust, fostering mutual understanding of each other's constraints, and you can unconstrain them, and strength and facilitative approach towards create a learning atmosphere so the everybody is ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to contribute. Next slide. So competency building tips, getting continuous feedback from the others. If it is about communication, if it is about presentation skills or public speaking, of course you can record your performance and listen to your own voice and look at yourself, do a video recording and see what are the different mannerisms that you do, and follow standard courses and work with a mentor. When you work with your mentor, you also can shadow his or her style and get feedback about yours. Practice excellent self-reflection and self-renewal approach. So it's a very important thing to refresh yourself. To refresh yourself is to reflect yourself. And then there are a lot of techniques that you can use for self-renewal. Learn from mistakes, your own mistakes, and also the mistakes of the others, because our lifetime is not enough to do all the mistakes that others do. So whenever there is a mistake of others, you can learn from them as well, and love to get on with new cultures, diversities, and values differences. Get opportunities to practice and master the skills. And when you have an opportunity to present something, always volunteer, grab that opportunity, use that opportunity to the fullest. And it can be a moderator, it can be a speaker, it can be a facilitating a group discussion, it can be any group activity. So get that opportunity and join interpersonal skill groups. You can set up, if you people can get together and set up interpersonal skill groups, small groups to work with, and then you can also shadow icons and people whom you think have the higher the interpersonal skills. Next slide. So highest interpersonal mastery is all about creating, sustaining, and improving synergetic and collaborative partnerships and contribution with people for long-lasting results. So let's look at some learning reflections with practical questions and scenarios. I invite Asela, the president of the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association, who is always very kind in sharing these learning reflections, the scenarios, who is also the evaluation capacity development expert. Please, and if you can turn to the next slide, I invite Asela to explain at least one scenario, then we'll open up the floor for Q&A.
Thank you, Ruchira. Sure, I can explain scenarios, but this time I would like, participants to engage in, sharing their thoughts about scenarios rather than we, give any answers to these. So, and Ruchira likes normally to, bring these scenarios to have, practical side of this, whatever he's, presenting, to have practical side, which is really good. Thank you, Ruchira, for the idea. So scenario one, the project under evaluation is implemented by a government counterpart, of which the head of the organization is going to retire in a few months. I think most of us have experienced, this kind of situations. He doesn't want the evaluation to reflect any negative points, as it will not be good for him. This is also we have experience, or typical. So he advises. At the same time, we are not saying all the places this is the case, right? So he advises the evaluation team to include only positive achievements of the project. So in this case, now Ruchira talked about negotiation skills, Ruchira talked about communication skills, and how we explain, how we convince other people. And also there are in other competency, other webinars, previous webinars, we talked about technical skills. Now in communication and on negotiation skills, we have to bring our technical expertise also. So with our knowledge, expertise on technical side, as well as our communication skills, negotiation skills, we have to handle these situations. So that's what I would see. So I would, give the opportunity to the participants if you want to. I don't know how much time we have, Abir. Abir is the one managing the webinar today. Up to Abir to decide whether we open for, a verbal comment. So in the chat. And and shall I go to the second one as well? The evaluation team needs to collect data from a remote community where there is no telephone facilities other than with the village officer. We hear this a lot when this is also happening, but at the same in normal situations as well. But now we hear a lot about this because of the COVID-19 situation, because people collect data remotely, and then at the same time, of course, you communicate at least remotely, and how to communicate with beneficiaries or people who participate in evaluations. So the evaluation team needs to collect data from a remote community where there is no telephone facilities other than with the village officer, whoever the government officer. If he is asked to inform people to be interviewed, he informs whom he wants to be interviewed. Right? What can we do? The evaluation team has a plan, data collection plan, and how to collect data and from whom. At the same time, evaluation team needs to communicate this with people who have been chosen for as interviews, but at the same time, how to communicate and what are the channels, right? So those are the issues. So with this, I am just explaining this, but answers we have to discuss. I don't know whether there is time, Abir, so over to you.
Thank you, Ruchira, and thank you, Estella. That was really informative and rich about the interpersonal competencies. I liked very much how Ruchira started with reflection, synergy, and passion. And you are also concluding with asking us to really be advocates for evaluation and the importance of these interpersonal skills, especially when you mentioned also ethics and respect, which is one of the ethical principles in research and evaluation. That was very informative. We have now around 10-15 minutes for Q&A, and I've been following the questions and the comments in the chat box. And we can take them in order. So if Ruchira and Asela would like to address them. I'll start with the first question that came from Abdullah, and apologies for everyone in case I pronounce any name incorrectly. So Abdullah was asking, what are the key and essential skills required for an evaluator? And this question came, Ruchira, early as you were progressing in the presentation, but please, if you'd like to comment or say anything more about what you explained for this question.
Yeah, thank you, Abir. I think if I understand the question again, he's asking about
what are the key and essential skills required of an evaluator?
Yeah, I think that is what we are discussing during the webinar series. So if it is, that's what I have explained. There is a competency framework, and when we say competencies, we talk about knowledge, we talk about skills, and we also talk about dispositions, or we say behaviors. So there are those three aspects in combination create a competency. So there are different competencies as we explain. We started with the professional competency. So there are the knowledge. There is a knowledge part of it. And also there are skills, that how you practice transparency, and then how you value differences. Likewise, there are skill part. And when you talk about contextual mastery, also skill part, how you manage change, how you read your context, respond to the, how can you be responsive to the context. And when you talk about technical competencies, we talk a lot about the strategy, the valuability, and the making evaluation questions, the reporting, everything. So the formal technical cycle. And in program management, we talk about the different project and program management skills. So if we and today also we talk about interpersonal skills. So there are skills. There is, of course, there is knowledge that you can apply, that you can sometimes gather, extract from the usual formal courses. And other than that, for example, communication is skills. As I mentioned, is a prime skill that evaluator has to practice, evaluator has to own. So I think it's a kind of a summary question. There are a lot of skills that evaluators need to practice, and we can actually arrange them in different competency groups. So it can be technical skills, it can be interpersonal skills, as we discussed today, it can be contextual analysis skills, it can be the professional development, the career planning skills that we will discuss during the next webinar. So I think that you have to take time and understand this different skill set. Of course, you can, if you want to get more feedback, even the others want, you can always try write to APEA and get the framework and understand the skill part of it. So we talk about competencies. Definitely there is a skill part, knowledge part, and disposition. So it is a very broader subject that you need to learn under different competency domains. Asela, you want to add anything, you are free to add. And Abir, even others, if you have any idea, not always that has to be, the feedback has to be a question, right? If any feedback or anything that you think that can add value, or your own experience, that's something that we have not covered, all of them are welcome.
Yes, of course, we are welcoming all questions and comments as well. I'll try to cover as much of the questions that we received because we have 9 minutes left also. But we also had a question, 2 questions actually from Julius. And the first question was, what is the best way to deal with people doing evaluation together but cannot seem to agree on anything?
Okay, it's about if we can relate that question to the discussion today. So if there is a disagreement, and if you think that it's not really a constructive disagreement, so sometimes it can have a dead end, then that is the place that where you have to use your negotiation skills and to manage that disagreement. So I must say we cannot say a kind of a copybook answer that you have to follow A, B, C, and D when you have a disagreement. So it all depends on the situation. So the most important thing is you get your practice by facing this situation. So it's always good to listen to the other person viewpoint first, and without any judgments, and see whether there is substance in it, where if that is true, if there is a point that you need to address, so make sure that you collect everything, and then you start to discuss. And if there is a story of your own, then you have to tell that story, and using your skills, you've got to come to a place where you can agree. Sometimes agreement is actually flexible. I mean, you have something and the other person has something. It's always respecting these two viewpoints and come to a point that you can agree that will not harm your evaluation pathway or evaluation of meeting the objectives.
Thank you, Rashera. We also had another question from Numa, and the question was about how would one assess such competencies for an evaluator during a hiring process, for example? Is there a way where they can assess these when hiring an evaluator?
Yeah, that is a very important question, I must say, and that is a very sensitive and tricky question as well. Now, we see in the world of HR, people, the companies, not only in the development sector, but overall in every industry, people, the HR professionals are moving from the traditional job description and job specification. You know, we have job description, we have job specification, and then we merge the two to have the job profile that we use for advertising. So they are actually going away from traditional job JDs and job specification to competencies. So the first thing, to have competency. So this is a competency framework. And then you have to think of a ranking system or something similar to that to judge those competencies, and then have a panel, usually maybe your hiring panel or recruitment panel. And then you have got to judge the competency. In fact, Abir, we have not only competency framework, we have also developed assessment pathway. So in the assessment pathway, we talk about different rubrics, different methods that you can use to assess competencies. So you can use your own rubrics. That is, you can have the ranking system 0 to 5, how you judge the competencies. And the tricky part is what are the methods and what are the tools that you use to judge the competencies. For example, if it is about interpersonal competencies, and then you can use a different, if it is knowledge, you can give a knowledge test. If it is something, you can use both formative assessment and also the diagnosis, formative, summative, both methods. You can sometimes ask to do a presentation and see how the other person is going to use this competence. So you can be a behavioral interview. You can present a scenario. Okay, you are in this scenario, like the two scenarios that Asela mentioned. What do you do? How do you react? So it's a good question. I would say is a good problem to solve when you assess the competencies. But you have to judge the other persons based on the answers that the person gives you. You have to have some ranking system or judgmental scales to assess the competencies in hiring. And also, Abir, one thing, in some competencies like knowledge, and there are some competencies, you can use narratives also. That means you can ask the other person to prove that you have the competencies, maybe the situation, maybe his achievements, his or her achievements, the projects that he has done to support that, to show that he is competent.
Thank you, Ruchera. And I can see that Asela also is contributing to the discussion in the chat box. We have 2 or 3 more questions and a few comments. However, we are short in time, and I truly apologize for not being able to take more questions and comments. However, we have marked all your questions, and we will see how we can address them in the materials as well. All the material will be shared with the participants, so you will have that. Thank you so much, Ruchera, for this informative presentation and the discussions and the thoughts about the importance of the interpersonal competencies in evaluation. Thank you, Asela, also for the contribution. And in conclusion of our webinar, I am also pleased to invite Yatin Diwakar now, co-leader of Evaluators Asia and Evaluators India, to give his closing remarks for the webinar. Yatin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Abir. This was another excellent presentation in the 8 webinar series on competencies for evaluators. This was the 6th one, which focused on the interpersonal competencies. Interpersonal competencies are something which are very crucial for all evaluators, rather everyone who is in a profession in the development sector, because we have to interact with multiple stakeholders from the community, the beneficiaries, the project implementers, funders, government agencies, and other evaluators during the project evaluation, as well as while we are reaching out to them with the study reports, etc. And all of that was nicely highlighted through the 7 competencies and the 37 indicative behaviors. These together create a very nice, I would say, a syllabus for us to follow to improve ourselves and become better competent evaluators and communicators, I would say. I would like to thank our speaker Ruchira first for the detailed and point to the point presentation. The entire IRIPE team, which has been preparing this framework and other documents, and APEA, which has been coordinating all the efforts. I thank Jasmine Shrestha for the opening remarks at the start, and Asela for his guidance throughout the presentation and through the entire process. The entire production team at Sleva, including Hasiti and Randika, for their excellent coordination. A special thanks to Madhuka, the APEA coordinator, for continuous work behind the scenes. And lastly, I thank our moderator, Abir Hakos, for controlling the session very well and making the interacting participation. Finally, I have a pleasant duty at the end, which is to invite everyone for the next webinar in the series, the webinar number 7 on personal and professional development on 23rd of October at 6:30 p.m. IST or 9 a.m. EST. Please do join us for that event as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yatin, for the closing remarks. And I second what you said. A really big thank you for our speakers today, Ruchera and Asela. Thank you for APEA and IRIPE for organizing this series of webinars. To everybody who was with us in the session today, I was really delighted to be with you getting this session for all the I think that let me try to fix that. Okay, apologies. It was really great being with you today. I hope everybody spent 1 hour of quality learning, and we all continue to advocate for evaluation and competencies of evaluators worldwide. Best wishes and greetings from Jordan to all my friends in Asia Pacific and worldwide, and have a good day, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Ruchra. Always great presentation.
Thank you. Really, it was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a